Protesters enrage themselves over Dave Chappelle's latest Netflix special. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. This may come as a surprise to some people. Probably not. But I'm not really the biggest fan of stand-up comedy. It's just not my thing. I would have never watched this Dave Chappelle Netflix special if it wasn't for all the uproar. With all this commotion, I had to give it a shot. In one's head, you might be imagining, where there's smoke, there must be fire. Look at all these news articles. Look at these cancellation attempts. Look at the... I'm not even sure what you want to call it. The voices who are seeking the destruction of this special and probably Dave's career. So, I turned it on. And overall, I knew this was going to happen. I didn't find it overly funny. It's not really my cup of tea. But could it have been funny to someone else? For sure. I thought it was a good job overall. It was entertaining. But when I compared it to what I was expecting given the chaos, it definitely is not worth all the controversy. Period. I was astounded. How can any logical being see what I've just seen and believe in their heart of hearts that this is worth going to war over? Now, the key there is logical being. We're probably dealing with illogical individuals who are up in arms over this. And let's begin there. If you haven't seen the special, you should watch it just to get some context here. But the charge was Dave Chappelle is transphobic. This latest special is some sort of bringer of evil. It had to have been vanquished. It was going to inspire mass violence against the trans community. It was going to make them feel uncomfortable. It was going to do this and this and that. Now, it was produced and aired by Netflix, so that's where much of the controversy occurred. There were staffers at Netflix who walked out of the office to show their support for the trans community. There was an individual who leaked private ratings to the media, and they were fired over this. People stormed into these C-suite boardrooms to have their voices heard. And when you look at what really happened, none of this makes any sense. Dave did joke about the phenomenon of transgenderism. But while he did that, he also spoke very passionately about a dear friend he had. He told the story of how he met her and how they grew to become friends, and this was a trans individual. Then things took a sharp turn where he revealed that this trans friend of his committed suicide. And he was alluding to a potential factor there. Dave was getting mobbed as usual on social media. It was the same tarring and feathering that we've become all too accustomed to, but this trans friend of his came to his defense. She said, "Hey, I actually know Dave. He's definitely not transphobic. In fact, you could maybe describe him as a supporter." Then, the mob turned on her. Relentless bullying. Now, was that the sole reason that this tragic outcome occurred? Probably not. Did it contribute to it? Probably so. And here is a lesson. Much of these social justice activists are very eager to destroy anything in their path to get their message across. Even if they're proclaiming to be trying to help and support trans lives, well, here they are contributing to the destruction of one. Do they feel sorry about that? Did they consider this? Definitely not. And in there is irony that he was hinting towards. And these things were embedded in the jokes that he put out there, but it was quite touching. And that segment alone, to me, seemed more like a plea for compassion. It's not Dave trying to get more transgender people killed. One of his friends was trans and they died. And he's identifying how the toxic climate of these activists may not have helped anything in that regard. In some sense, what he did here was humanize the transgender debacle. He gave a real story of someone who suffered as a result of the situation. And after seeing that, people still went out and labeled this special as a transphobic piece. It doesn't make any sense. And it leads me to believe that many individuals who are trying to get this thing taken down didn't actually watch it. They're simply going off based on the popular narrative. Further, these people who are very agitated about the special seem to not understand comedy. It's a form of expression, in some ways a form of art. It's interesting to me how some of the Billboard Top 100 songs, especially in the rap genre, are about killing people, objectifying women, doing drugs, and all of these crazy things, but there are no activists who are up in arms about the messages there. We're talking about literally songs about killing people and glorifying it. But when we have a comedy special that's poked a little bit of fun at the trans community, well, that's where they're drawing the line. Honestly, it's crazy. These are definitely not the kinds of people that you want policing what you can and cannot say, what you can and cannot joke about, what you can and cannot express. You just be subjugated to whatever their whims are. Now, I must admit, it'd be a very different story if Chappelle actually went on stage and was trying to launch a genocidal campaign. Then we'd have something to talk about. But that's so far away from what the reality of the situation is. And now it just makes me wonder, what do these far-left activists hold as a standard? What types of jokes would they find acceptable? Not that we should care, but still, it's interesting to think about. What could one potentially joke about in regard to the trans community that would be okay? It seems like to me their stance is nothing. And the trans community is just a microcosm. There are many other social justice values that they would not want joked about. It's not even just joking either. There are many of these ideas that they hold so dear, they don't want critiqued, they don't want discussed, they don't want talked about. They simply want to ram it down your throat. Now people will ask me, well, why do I identify wokeism and this new age progressivism as a religion? Well, it exhibits many of the core tenets of what we've seen in the past with these religious states, the sanctimony, the blasphemy laws that they're trying to administer, the total control over the ways in which you can communicate. And if you veer from that, you're being castigated as a devil. And they want the repercussions to fall upon you as such. The very basis for their argument in this case is super shaky. It's very debatable if this in fact was a transphobic presentation or special. I'm veering towards it not being so, especially with the way Dave talked about his trans friend. Now, from this, the premise is already off. What follows from it is flawed as well. It's pure insanity. And we saw this materialize at, so in front of Netflix, where I was mentioning the staff walked out of the offices, there was a group of individuals holding signs and chanting, doing the typical song and dance routine. Now, this video went viral on social media. I'm going to describe it. There was someone who you can regard as a counter-protester. He showed up with a sign. It said something like, "I love Chappelle." As soon as he shows up, the protesters who were protesting against Dave Chappelle special and Netflix for airing it, they identify that, and they get quite violent. They grabbed a sign while he's still holding it. They start shredding it and ripping it. And this next part here is breathtaking. When they rip the sign, all that's left is a stick. The actual written piece has fallen off now that they've destroyed it. And the person who destroyed the sign, the guy's still holding the stick now, right? He starts yelling, "The counter-protester has a weapon. He's got a weapon. He's got a weapon." He's causing a scene. He's drawing a lot of attention. But just take in the idiocy of what happened here. The individual is holding a sign, and you destroy it. And now this destroyed sign, you're crying about it being a weapon that you've created for him. And this whole claim is nonsensical because the guy is not posing a threat. He's laughing at them. So once again, we get to another irregularity in the thinking of the far left. Protesting is fine and well and good if you are protesting for things that we believe in. If you're showing up to stand for the things that we declare to be holy. But if you're coming around here with different perspectives, no, we're going to destroy your sign, and we're going to try and get you arrested, and faux this image of you being some type of deadly weapon wielder. Things get crazier. So now a small group starts to come around, and they're forcibly pushing him out of this protesting circle. They're getting in his face, making him back up. And as this is happening, the guy's just laughing. he's saying, "I love Chappelle, jokes are funny," kind of egging them on. And there's this one lady with something like a cowbell, just hitting it and screaming. You can't even make out what she's saying. She's chanting some type of slogan. Very religious. It's almost like she's saying a prayer to banish the devil. Really, when you view it through this religious lens, things just line up in ways that are far more than convenient. And that's something that strikes me. These people here who are protesting for what they regard to be a good virtue, a good value, respecting trans rights and all of that. Here they are making fools of themselves, embarrassing themselves, destroying someone's sign, and then claiming he now has a weapon. Idiocy. Yelling in someone's face as you're hitting a cowbell. Idiocy. They don't feel embarrassed by the way they're behaving. This is not adult ways to act in a civilized society. This is childlike behavior. They're not interested in engaging the other side. They're not interested in hearing contrary opinions. They're not even interested in discussing what the truth is. They're interested in ramming through their agenda. And if you're not on their side, you're the enemy. As exemplified by this protest and like many we've seen in recent history. And I do fear what's happening to the fabric that has held society together for many decades. It's tearing apart at the seams, and people in power are not doing anything to mend that. In some ways, it seems like the lunatics are the ones running the asylum here. Truly. Now, to be very clear, there are cases where protest and displays of solidarity are called for. If there was a situation where a trans individual was just doing their own thing, and someone targeted them for that fact about them, and they harmed them, they beat them, they did whatever, super against that, not condoning any of that madness, that'd be terrible, people should get mad about that. But we're here, put it back into context, talking about a comedy special that may have not even been transphobic to begin with. And if you watch it, I think you'd err on that side of the debate. And from that, we're creating this type of spectacle. We're making that nationwide news. We're putting so much attention towards this when there are many other problems to deal with. That's what I mean when I talk about lunacy. That's a definition of it. Fundamentally, I support trans rights. I think everyone, I support everyone's right to just be themselves and not face undue consequences for that. Just leave each other alone. But what I do not support is the ramming of virtue and pseudo-scientific notions down other people's throats. I encourage differences of opinion. If truth becomes the utterances of the most loud pockets of society, and any debate to try and combat that gets met with harsh consequences, we're not living in a civilized society anymore. We've regressed and we're definitely on that path. One contributing factor to our descent is clearly corporate cowardice, how corporations are bowing down to these woke motions and notions and movements because they don't want to lose out. They have a perception that their bottom line will be negatively impacted for standing their ground. Now, the Netflix CEO, I believe, said that we have no problem with Dave, we're keeping it up there, but later, after further backlash mounted, he gave some sort of pseudo-apology where he said we should have taken into account what our employees are feeling and all of this. Now, it's very clear to me that the C-suite, they don't believe it's much of an issue, as many people don't either. It's a comedy special, has jokes in it, jokes about many groups actually, and many different topics, and as we've talked about numerous times here, Dave gave a heartfelt segment to a dear trans fan who tragically lost her life. Now, if you want to label that as transphobic, it's questionable. Maybe we could hear the debate out, we can talk about it. But to pull the plug and to get that show taken off, it would set a terrible precedent. That simply having hissy fits in front of the office and going crazy about things that may not even be justifiable gets you these rewards. There comes a point where the adults in the room have to put their foot down. And that's the bottom line here. Far too many times have we seen corporations and politicians and the government bow down to notions that we know are not doing any good for society, simply because they don't want to deal with the bullying and the harassment, the scare tactics, and the general toxicity that comes with battling the far left. They've definitely mastered the art of persuasion, if you want to call it that, in the digital era. Usually they say that they're against bullying, but they'll deploy that mechanism when it comes to something that can further their cause. Usually they're much in favor of protesting when it's for a cause they support. There are much of these inconsistencies tolerant, but they're intolerant when this happens, all of that. Individuals in positions of power just have to have some guts and some courage, and they have to be able to weather the storm. We're going to become crazier and crazier as a nation as other parts of the world get stronger and stronger, like China and Russia. It's a recipe for societal collapse and an altering of the system of world power. The best way to defeat an enemy is to not even do anything, let them defeat themselves, and clearly America is doing that, and Canada might not be too far behind. Now, once again, I do encourage you just to watch the special for yourself and make your own judgments here. See whose side of the debate you're truly on. And with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.